Welcome to the Red Eye Perspective. I'm your host, Mohammad Al-Wishahi. Good day, everybody. My name is Mohammad Al-Wishahi. I'm your host from the Red Eye Perspective. Thank you for joining us today. Today is another special episode with one of my dear friends. Yeah, they are my friends. This is my second child. Her name is Hadeel Al-Wishahi. Thank you for coming here, Baba.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Absolutely. So, as mentioned to you before, your sister and I had a podcast recorded a few days ago, and we learned a lot about each other. Especially from your childhood, growing up. She gave me a very clear idea about what were her impressions as a child, looking at me as her dad. And what did she know, didn't she know about my work, and how did that impact her later, or when she knew what I did for a living, did that change anything for her and all that stuff? So we're going to do the same thing with you today. And without any further ado, would you like to say a couple of words about yourself, honey?
I am the middle child. I'm 24, about to be 25. I'm the crier of the family, so there may be some tears.
I brought tissues.
Great. Always prepared. And yeah, I'm just happy to be here. Like, I'm so proud of you and I look up to you so much. So to be able to talk about this with you is like really exciting to me. So yeah.
Thank you, honey. Welcome. So without any further ado, I wanted to ask you, as a child growing up in our family, did you notice anything about my work? Were you interested? Were you puzzled? Did you find anything interesting? Did you have any questions that you never got a chance to ask? So just childhood, beginning of, recognition for you. What were your impressions from that time?
I knew that you were an important person, but I didn't know why. I felt like there was always a mystery around like your job, especially since I knew that you worked for the State Department, but I was confused because I would go to work sometimes with mom and I would go to her office and I would say like, okay, I want to go visit dad. And it was like, you're not allowed to. So sometimes I was like confused why that was the case, but in my mind, it just meant like you were super important and it was just untouchable. I felt like there was a lot of secrets, like things that we had to keep to ourselves that I didn't understand why. And I just did it because, I was told and I was the child. But that is like the extent of what I knew as a child. I was more fearful to question, so I just trusted whatever was happening was supposed to happen.
Well, there was also a given those days that even if you asked, you would not going to be given the answer you were wishing for. But before you go into workspace of the U.S. government, let's take it back a little when you were much younger. You've seen your dad travel, at least, or disappear for a few weeks, sometimes at a time. And what did that tell you those days? Did you ask questions? Were you wondering at least?
No, I just felt like you were very important and you were needed. That was all I thought about. I didn't really think about why, because for me, I was very young when you were going on business trips, even when we still lived in America. So it was very normal. I never thought that it was different or abnormal or anything like that. It just was our life.
And when you started going to daycare or like later on kindergarten school, did you face any sort of questions about, what does your dad do for a living that you couldn't answer or you were unsure what to say?
Not when I was that young, but definitely when we started moving around and people would ask, why are you here? Okay, my family were diplomats. My dad works for the US Embassy. Well, what does your dad do? And I never knew what to say. And then I felt like when I would ask, I didn't get an answer that I understood enough to relay to other people. I think when I got a little bit older, before I knew still, I would tell people, oh, my dad works in the political section. So he works on relations between the US and the country we're living in at the time.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
that was my go-to answer for people.
Well, that was a perfect answer, by the way. It was supposed to be that way. Anyways, but that's cool. I have to remember, I don't know if you do remember this, the story from Bosnia when the kids were asking you or comparing dad's jobs, and you said, my dad was the president of the United States Embassy. Do you remember that one?
I do, yes.
How old were you at the time?
6 years old.
Oh, wow. Okay. And then later, I think a couple of years later, or in the same year, you met with the ambassador, right?
Yes.
And you gave him such an important, like, fan-like, response or reaction. Do you remember that?
Yes, I asked for his autograph and he said, as
Yeah.
long as you don't use it, he said, as long as you don't use it on a blank check.
Yeah, yeah. He was such a gracious man. I really liked him. He was a good man, and left me with the greatest impressions about, what a gentleman, what a decent human could be. Always engage the family, children, and spouses, and try to be helpful, at least, polite and sweet. I mean, he couldn't help everybody, but at least he tried. So part of it is also me telling you that those days also were difficult on me in terms of not being able to tell you what I did for a living, because I felt that I owed you to tell you that, but I couldn't. It's for my and your safety and the safety of my own colleagues and my own agency. I couldn't say exactly what I did for a living because it was such a huge burden to put on the shoulders of children who don't know how to handle it. And it was also difficult on me. So, and I start to stutter telling you answers that sounded like a cookie cutter generic statement from a newspaper. I want to let you know that I didn't feel good about it.
Yeah.
It was just didn't. I felt very disingenuous with my own kids, and that was not a good feeling at
Yeah. I mean, that's understandable now. I want you to know that's not the impression I have.
all.
I truthfully, I didn't even know that what you did was real. I thought it was just something like in movies. So I don't blame you for anything. And I think because I knew at a older age, there was a maturity that came with that and an understanding that this is what had to be done for the safety of our family.
Well, I appreciate that. When you do what you do in my line of work, outside the realm of friends and family, it's understandable you are serving an ultimate, like, better goal for, national security, safety for all, and all that. But when you deal with family and friends and you're in that position where you're unable to really tell the whole truth, that's not a good feeling at all. I remember telling a story about coming back from a very long trip one time, and it was like about 7 weeks. And I went through a few countries and used a few identities throughout that trip. So coming back at Dallas, I get in a taxi, and a gentleman driver was very kind, and he wanted to carry a conversation because our trip was long. It was about an hour or more. So he wanted to carry a conversation with me, but of course, he's a taxi driver. I'm still undercover, so I was gonna carry on with more lies, but I didn't feel like it. I felt like, darn it, I'm home. I don't want to lie anymore. So I told the driver, it's like, if you don't mind, sir, I'm really tired. I have a headache. Do you mind if I just want to dose off? So I could tell he looked at me in the mirror. He didn't like my answer. He was kind of offended in a way, but it's like, you know what? Be offended. I just don't want to lie to you because it's not necessary. I'm home. I'm done. I'm exhausted of flying. This is where I am me. So just take me home. So it didn't really feel good when you're not necessarily doing it for pure direct work. I mean, still for you guys and other individuals like neighbors and family members, it was for the protection of everyone. But no, it wasn't a good feeling. Anyhow, fast forward. Do you remember or recall at what age were you before I told you directly what I did for them? At what age did you feel like, all right, this is not what I think it is or what they're telling me? Did you have that impression?
Never.
Never. Okay.
I was frustrated and annoyed that like I couldn't go visit you at work
Mm, mm,
or like annoyed that I couldn't get a hold of you. Like I wasn't able to just call your cell phone during
mm,
the workday.
mm,
Even though it wasn't like anything really important, I just wanted to like have a
mm,
chat.
mm,
So those things were frustrating, but I never had a moment where I was like, okay, cut it out. Can somebody just tell me what's going on? I never felt that way.
mm, mm. Well, that's very gracious of you. Thank you for being that kind. So, with that, I want to move forward to the day when I sat with you in Reston and told you.
Yes.
You know the story, so you tell it from your perspective.
So to be honest, I thought it was all a joke because you are a jokester. Like you do like to play jokes and stuff like that. And like I said, my knowledge even about the agency itself was so limited. I thought it was something fictional. The
Mm,
only time I ever recall hearing about it was like in a movie.
mm,
I also remember that not too long before you had that conversation with me, we had watched that movie Meet the Fockers.
mm,
So he had that bus that he went under and like all of the stuff. So I thought it
mm,
was like silly. Like I thought it was just a joke for Hollywood.
mm,
And I remember like when you told me and I had made a joke about it. And
mm.
I was like, oh, like, do you have one of those computers that you click clack and all this information comes
Yeah.
up? And then you gave me like the sternest look and you were like, please take this seriously. And then when you said that, I was like, oh my God, this is not a joke. So it definitely took a moment for me to process because I had to even understand that what you were talking about was real, that it wasn't something made up or fictional. And then I had to process that you were a part of it.
Mm, mm. Yeah, we were reminiscing the other day with Saja and I, and she even forgot that she was there. And
Oh,
when you said it was a joke, she jumped in because she was like, "No, no, he's serious." And she's like, "I was there." I said, "Yeah, you were there. You were being helpful and trying to convince your sister that it was an actual serious conversation." I remember that day very clearly, and I remember you were taken aback a little bit. You were shocked a little bit, and you wanted to kind of think it over before formulating an answer. But the one that I remember the most is when you said to me that just please be safe.
yeah.
Your concern number one was just, okay, do what you do, just be safe. Do you remember that?
Um, I didn't I didn't really understand at that time what exactly you did. You had just given me, I think, like a basic overview.
Mm,
Like, this is who I work for, this is how many years I've been doing it, and this is basically what I do.
mm,
Um, I think like throughout my life, I had learned like to trust you very much. I think you're the only person on earth. Like if you told me the sky was purple, I would believe you, even if my eye showed me it was blue. So I figured if you've been doing this for this long at this point and you're okay and we're okay, then you must be good. So just do it, but I don't want a scratch on your body because
mm.
then we'll have a problem. But right now you're good.
I wonder what kind of a problem we would have if I came home one day with an injury.
I'll tell you to quit your job.
Yeah, no, I can understand, everybody has a different reaction. Again, I t told the story to your sister how some of my colleagues shared a little bit, although I cannot talk about their names or identities, but just kind of the generic stories that when one of them was really nervous, just to, by the way, to let you know that we get nervous when we want to disclose the type of information to anyone, especially our family members. But no, that guy decided to distract his son. And on a Sunday, he said, "Hey, do you want to drive my truck?" And he knew that his son was addicted to the idea of driving that truck. So he goes, "Really?" He said, "Yeah." So he got in the truck with his dad and he kept giving him directions, drive here, left, right, and led him into the headquarters of the CIA. And the
Wow.
kid was not even paying attention to the sign outside the gate, the guards. He just, because he had to arrange, of course, things in advance to allow him to enter. So the dad took care of these things. And then entering the building, it's a Sunday, so the parking lot is pretty much empty. So he was driving and driving, and while he's driving the truck on the parking lot, the father said, "Hey, by the way, son, I work here. I work for the CIA." So he goes, the only response I got from him was like, "Oh, wow, that's cool, Dad." And he continued to drive the truck as if nothing happened.
That's so funny.
So the distraction worked beautifully, and the father did a much easier job and never was questioned again about it by the son. The son was like, "Oh, yeah, okay, fine. So you work there. That's cool."
Yeah.
Others, really, their children just lost it. They're about trust and betrayal. Why would you do that to me? Why didn't you tell me about it before? And why did you lie? And all these kind of things. And it took a lot of work from the family to get through it, to help the child deal with this. And it wasn't easy. So your analogy, what you just shared with me, kind of gives me a great idea about your state of mind and the way you process these kind of things. You took it from, okay, he's been doing it for a while, and I trust him. He fulfilled his promises to me before, so there is trust. So if he tells me whatever, I believe it, and he's okay. So that means he also will continue to be okay. It's a great analogy. For Saja, it was like, pride. She said, "Oh, I'm proud of you." For her, it was, okay, he's cool. I'm proud of you. And Yazan said something similar. He said, "Oh my God, you're cool." That was it. So yeah, but I just want to let you know that for me, I was nervous. I had to rehearse it and think about it and think about the pros and cons. What could you have said? What could you have responded with? And what would I do? What would I say? It was quite a bit of a hurdle for me, from my perspective.
I bet that was tough. And also, like hearing the stories from your colleagues, like everyone is different. So you have no idea how your kids are going to respond. And if you hear like a more negative way that it went with one of your friends, I'm sure like it made you nervous that it could be a possibility with their own kids as well.
Definitely. So let's talk about post your awareness that your dad is working in this outfit. And one question I'm going to repeat with, told your sister, I'm going to repeat it with you and your brother, is that were you later thinking alone, sitting somewhere alone, you began to connect the dots of stories you heard before and individuals and faces and names?
Every single day I remember something new and it starts to like make sense.
Mm,
Even now, like how much 7 years later almost, I
mm,
still am like finding things where I'm like, oh, this is why this was this way and why he
mm,
said this, why he did this and stuff like that.
mm,
I think
mm,
this feeling of pride that Seja and Yazan had initially, obviously, like, I'm a very fear driven individual. So it doesn't mean that in the moment when you told me I wasn't proud of you, but I was just nervous, like that
mm,
I just wanted you to be okay because obviously what you were engaging in wasn't necessarily safe. Like you need a lot of skills to make sure that you're not in danger.
mm, mm,
But now, since you're retired and not in that space, I feel like I have more room to think about things and connect them and be excited and proud of them. Like even last night, Yazan and I had a conversation about how cool you are and how like even if you weren't our dad, we would still think you're the coolest person ever because like who could do something like this the way you did it and like still come out with like a good head on your shoulders and all of this stuff. So yeah, for me, it's like an everyday thing. I think about things that make me like so excited about you.
Well, thank you for saying these sweet things. And just again, for the caveat, there are tens of thousands of Americans who are working in many similar outfits throughout the country. And these men and women do their best to do their jobs as best as they can while also protecting their loved ones. So just to caveat, I was not the only one. And your perspective and like view as a daughter toward a father, that's very sweet and really highly appreciated, but it's just, So now afterwards, you said you began to connect the dots. Were you able later to kind of articulate a cover answer for when somebody asks you what your father is doing or what he does for a living? Were you able to articulate an answer that you were comfortable with?
I just kept it the same
Hmm.
because there was still a few years where you were still working, not retired, still undercover. So I didn't switch up my answer because even you told me that day, like nothing changes to everybody else. So
Mhm.
whatever answers you're giving to people, whatever impressions you're giving to people, none of that changes. The only thing that changes is now in this inner circle, you are now aware, and that's it.
Mhm.
So I worked really hard, like not to flinch my face or not to let anybody think like I was hiding something. Or when like people would say that stupid thing that I cannot stand. Oh, what does your dad do for a living? Oh, he works for the State Department. Does he really work for the State Department? Or is it something that if you tell me, you would have to kill me? Like, I cannot stand when people say that. So it was just like a work in progress of like making sure, everything stayed the same. Nobody could tell because now I felt like I was part of the operation.
In essence, you were all along. Um, in fact, I think you probably don't know this, but a couple of times you were on an operation with me, but you didn't know it. Like I was in an operational act out there in those countries that you were with me, and even back in the States before we started to PCS, but you didn't know about it. So when we talked about, oh my God, Dad is going to be an influencer last night, I'm like,
Yeah.
you have no idea. I've been influencing people's lives for a long time.
Yes.
So later, when you were in college, you had developed an interest in this outfit.
Right.
And tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, since my degree is in political science and international studies, I learned a lot about your agency and the operations that have been done and the impressions that the world has on them now after, things have been able to develop. So I had more of appreciation for you. And then I also felt like, okay, this is in my blood. Like, this is easy. I can do this too. um, but also just thinking like all the time, like, oh, I wonder if Dad knows about this. I wonder if Dad like has information about this and stuff like that. But yeah, at first I was very interested in it. And I had some conversation to see if there was room or if it was a good decision for me to try to take in a career aspect. Later, I decided that it's not for me. But yeah, I did enjoy learning more about it and seeing like what are the possibilities for me. And I know that it's not always like to the extent of what you did or to the seriousness of what you did. I know there's many different levels, but yeah.
Yeah, I remember those conversations, and we had a talk or two about it. I introduced you to a couple of my friends, colleagues from the outfit, so they can also give you their perspective because they might have something different than my experience, and thereby you would have more points of view to make an educated decision about what you're going to do with your career in the future. And to be honest with you, I was relieved when you decided, okay, this is not for me, because again, as probably every parent in the universe, when they go through a type of career that they consider to be quite challenging or difficult, when it comes to their own children, they don't want the children to go through those type of difficulties. So, but nonetheless, thank goodness that you decided to do something different, which I was very happy about. At the time, I was like secretively praying that you don't go through that. But I'd be remiss if I don't mention the story when I asked you to help me collect intelligence one day in Abu Dhabi, if you remember that. Do you remember that when I asked you to go into the pool?
Yes, I do.
Tell me the story because it was just the cutest thing ever.
From what I remember, I felt like you were trying to build my confidence.
Mm,
Because I do feel like I was very attached to you. I think even when we had gatherings at the house,
mm.
all the kids would be playing. I wouldn't be playing with the kids. I would be sitting with you and the men and listening to you guys talk about politics. And you were always like, go be with the kids. So from my perspective at the time, I felt like you were just trying to have me like make a friend.
Mm.
And you had asked me like, go talk to this girl. She looks like she's your age. Ask her like, what's her name? Where's her dad? What is he doing? I don't remember the conversation with the girl.
Mm.
Um, but I remember coming back to you and giving you all this information. And also, we used to play these games like, oh, go ask, the stranger where they're from, go ask them these questions.
Mm.
And I always thought it was just like a confidence building thing. And it was always like, okay, if you go do this, I'll give you 5 dirhams for doing. Motivation for me was money. And I just learned later on, what the true intention was for it.
It was hilarious. And I've tried the same with your siblings, but they were not into this kind of stuff. They were either too shy or too embarrassed or not interested. So with you, that day, I was struggling. I've been trying to make connections, and it was difficult because trying to figure out the timing on the weekend when people are there and all that. So suddenly I find this group of little girls your age in the water in the swimming pool, and they seem to be ethnically diverse. So I gave you the challenge to go approach them for, I don't remember how much money, 5, 10 years, I don't know. And you said you made sure that the number I gave you was like, so you give me this much. I said yes. So but I will never forget the way you approached them when you were in the water. It literally looked like a crocodile predator sneaking into the water very gently, and where you're swimming toward them, only your nose was above the water, but no, not a whole lot of wave. You didn't really make a lot of noise, and then I don't know, you were with them for 15, 20 minutes. And then by then, I think the food that we ordered arrived. And then you came and you gave me the briefing, but it was a very well detailed briefing, not about the girls, but you were saying, so that girl's father is from this country, but he's outside of the country right now on a business trip. And that girl's father, it was like you read my mind, what I was hoping to get. So you were part of the operation even then, but you didn't know it.
Well, I'm so glad I was of service, and you were like mentally checking, okay, this is the information I wanted to know. Thank you, Hadeel.
I say again, I was looking for certain individuals with certain, potential utilities, but it was very difficult to discern that when you don't run into the people, right? It is frustrating at the beginning to gauge what is the most timing of the day, the weekend they come there, show up alone with, where would be the right timing to insert yourself in a conversation? It's not easy, by the way. One of my bosses one time says, one of the kindest men I've ever worked for, he said to me, he's like, we operations officers have to be one of the most optimistic individuals on earth. I said, what do you mean? He said, come on, think about it, Mohammed. We go into a reception of 900 people, and every one of us is thinking, I'm going to get that one person that I need out of these 900 people.
Right.
That's optimism.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, that's one way of looking at it. Otherwise, that's stupidity. You think you're going to get that one as if you're the only one. Part of the 900 people, there are 200 people like us, also fishing and hunting. Anyhow, so now let's fast forward to today. You know that I've been retired for a couple of years, and want to give any impression on that?
I am very proud of you. I
Mhm.
do think a lot about when you got in, early 90s, and there's issues right now, I feel like, not in just your agency, but in many government agencies, lack of diversity, racism, microaggressions, so many things that people of color who have really good qualifications, who are very skilled, who are very smart, who face challenges every day just because they're different from the majority. And I cannot imagine in the early 90s being in that position with your name and the different challenges that you could have faced at that time. And you still came out so successful, so strong, with a good head on your shoulders. I can't imagine the amount of frustrations that you experienced, that you had to really push down and push down and push down just to do your job. So I think a lot about not only the work that you had to do as an employee, but also a husband and a father, and trying to stay afloat in all of these aspects, but then also the underlying of it, of the challenges that you face simply because of your identity. I think about that all the time. And that was one of the reasons why I decided that I did not want to do it, was because I don't want to be mistreated as a woman. I don't want to be mistreated as a woman of color. I don't want to be mistreated as an Arab. And it's 2020, at the time, 2022, that I was feeling this way. So I cannot imagine how much more difficult it was for you back then, when, diversity offices and things like that were not so established. Um, so yeah, I just think about all the challenges that you faced and the various levels that it came in, and you juggled all of it and you did such a good job. I have no feelings as a child that like you weren't there at my events or you weren't present at some play or graduation or anything like that, and you were able to do that. I'm just so proud of you. I want to tell everybody like how cool you are.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate it. Thank you for sharing those thoughts. And I agree with you 100%. It was not without a challenge to be in an agency as such. But I think of all the other people who preceded me from different ethnicities and genders who went through a lot of difficulties throughout the years. But what gives me hope is that I see a little bit of changes. I see that more females are given leadership positions. I see more like people of color given other opportunities. I see that there is an attempt of this ginormous machinery of bureaucracy to change a little bit. But do remember, at the end of the day, these bureaucracies and machineries and establishments are not an abstract. They are made of people. And also people who come bring to the work their own personal beliefs and thoughts and sometimes biases and all that stuff. So it's going to take some time before we accomplish like really good progress that everybody would be almost at an even keel, but we're not there yet. Definitely a challenge, definitely a continued work in progress for all of us. But one of the beautiful things about the agency is that it took a chance before anybody else, to be honest with you. I give them a lot of credit on that. For decades, they took chances that normally in American security establishment that would not be, heard of at the time.
Mhm.
But they did. And they accomplished more than others because of them including the diverse ethnicities and languages and people from different backgrounds because they needed them. And I mean, what is the agency if you don't have the ability to go and work in Africa, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, and Russia, and Europe, and Latin America? I've met a lot of my colleagues who spoke so many different languages. In one of our meetings, I remember mentioning this to you, we had 17 languages spoken in one room that included 11 individuals,
That's awesome.
right? So that capability you cannot find easily in other places, right?
Right.
You find people in that room that came from business background, aviation background, IT, um, money management. There's just amazing diversity. And again, are we there yet? Absolutely not. There's a lot of work ahead for everyone in the United States government, especially the CIA, because we do the work that is done is overseas. So we deal with all kinds of languages, ethnicities, people, nations, so we need to.
Mhm.
I remember one of the senior gentlemen I worked for one time mentioning his aggravation. This literally was like 12, 13 years ago. He was expressing his frustration with his fellows. These are very senior people that he was talking about because he was of the thought that we need to change and we need to include. And some of the people on his level were not. They were frustrated with certain technicalities and that people of my likes, like different diversity and different ethnicity, don't bring to the table, like amazing, beautiful, perfect, Queen's English. We don't have that. We all have accents, right? It's as simple as that, okay? But it's a struggle. And I see a lot of changes. I'm very proud to see, like, beginning with Miss Haspel when she took over as the director and the following assignments after that, I could see there is a serious attempt of infecting or affecting some change in the structure. Let's hope they do continue that effort.
I hope so. And also, you were there during 9/11 as well, I couldn't imagine how difficult it was as well, like being an Arab man in that position. And the stories that you've told about, people doubting you simply because of the name on your badge and things like that. And for me, it's like, I don't understand it, because I think you're the smartest person. I think you're like the most capable and most skilled person. So yeah, that's something I do think about a lot, is the way that must have been challenging for you. But also, like, how cool it is, like in a drop of a dime, you can speak a different dialect of something and anyone on the street would believe you were from there, even though you're not. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's so cool. So I think a lot of the skills, and yeah, just the skills that I've been able to like witness from you, even when you're not working, I think is like so cool to watch.
Well, again, I appreciate the compliment there, but like I said, tens of thousands of people working there and did work, and they were able to navigate through far more difficult times. 9/11 took like a big toll on me, mentally, physically, emotionally, because of the position that I was in counterterrorism, but at the same time, almost as a Muslim, as an Arab, it's like baffled at why would anybody think about causing that much harm to innocent civilians in this horrific fashion. But I can tell you, and we probably heard stories about when it was challenging because people questioned, because of my name or whatever. But I can tell you also in the same exact breath that when I went to a senior individual who heard about it, they took action, and they took action right away. I
Yeah.
remember one of my bosses, who I considered a friend, I mentioned to him that in a foreign country, somebody expressed serious doubts about me, or because of my background and ethnicity. And I kid you not, he gave him a call within minutes, and he chastised him. He's like, when I send you an officer, he represents me. He represents the agency in the United States government, regardless of his or her gender, ethnicity, or background. So if I hear anything like this anymore, we have to question and put in doubt our friendship here. So I'm going to give you another chance. I'm going to send him again, and I want you to grant him every respect and courtesy he is owed. And he hung up. And I had to basically take two, literally go to the meeting and take two, and things were very different. That man stood up for me. And he was one of many who also did the same thing for certain bureaucratic, little administrative, paperwork, and others actually related to operational things, who would actually stand up and say, no, no, he is one of my people, and I believe him or trust him, and I want him to be in charge of this, in charge of that. There were many examples of good people believing in the inclusivity of everybody in the agency and the viability of everybody's contribution. So I got to give credit when credit is due.
Yeah, it's important to have advocates like that in those kinds of spaces. So I'm glad that you had that around you.
Absolutely. Is there anything else you would like to close with? Because we're running out of time.
No, other than I'm so proud of you. I think like the world of you. Every day I read about something or learn about something that makes me even more proud of you. Thank you for everything you've done, like for our family, even when I didn't have awareness of it. Here's the crier. And yes, I love you very much, and I'm glad you're safe. And
right, when I reach for the water, I'm trying to stop myself from crying.
Well, I love you and I'm proud of you. And I think you're the smartest person on planet Earth. And I'm just so lucky that you're my dad. So thank you for.
Jenny, I really, really appreciate your kindness and your compliments. And back at you, I love you and I'm very proud of you. And thank you for your time today. And hopefully we get to wipe those tears in a few minutes after the podcast. Once again, folks, thank you for listening. This was Mohammad Al-Washahi from Red Eye Perspective, the Red Eye Consulting company. This was an interview with my daughter to get her impressions of her father's work as a CIA officer. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening to the Red Eye Perspective. For more information on training courses, consulting services, and speaking events, please visit redeyeconsultant.com.